Well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and that means it's time for another Food for Thought Friday. All right, well, this week I had the pleasure of listening to an interview with best-selling author and behavioral researcher Vanessa Van Edwards. In this interview, conducted by Dr. Jordan Peterson, Vanessa spoke on the topics of nonverbal communication and the subtle body language cues we can all leverage, if not fall completely prey to. Now, this podcast can be accessed anywhere great podcasts are served up. I'll probably put a screenshot of it somewhere here on the screen so you can see what it looks like, see how to search it up. I do highly recommend that you give it a listen if you're interested in topics like influence, leadership, and or image management. If you don't already know, I've got a passion for bridging the gap between scientific scholarly research, specifically in the behavioral sciences, and real-world, real-life practical application. And so as I listened to this podcast on nonverbal communication and its practical application, I was reminded of a paper that I read in my undergraduate degree by researchers Amy Cuddy, Peter Glick, and Anna Benninger from the Harvard Business School, and I've referenced this study on different videos in the past. Their paper appeared in the Journal of Research and Organizational Behavior, and the paper was titled The Dynamics of Warmth and Competence Judgments and Their Outcomes in Organizations. Again, I'm going to get a screenshot of that research paper, the first page of that article somewhere here on the screen, one side or the other, and you can check it out yourself if you so desire. On the podcast, Vanessa Van Edwards referred to this well-cited research, which is also reflected by Amy Cuddy and colleagues, and the research suggests that within 100 milliseconds of meeting a person for the very first time, we assess the individual on two factors. The first one is warmth. We assess, can I trust you? What is your intent? That's the warmth dynamic. And the second dynamic that we assess within 100 milliseconds of meeting somebody is competence. Can I respect you? Or do you know what you're doing? So, within 100 milliseconds of meeting a new individual for the very first time, we are quickly summing them up, and we are assessing warmth, and we're assessing competence. Do I trust you, and do I respect you? Now, these factors within organizations impact contexts such as hiring, employee evaluations, and task and resource allocation. Now, two noteworthy observations from the podcast that I listened to are as follows. The first one, individuals who are perceived as highly competent often suffer from a lack of perceived warmth or agreeability. They might come across to others as cold, distant, or disconnected. And this lack of warmth or perceived warmth can cause difficulty gaining buy-in. The solution would be that individuals perceived as highly competent might spend extra efforts on developing greater perceptions of warmth, openness, and likability. Hey, on that note, I'm wearing a t-shirt today as I record this video. I don't usually wear t-shirts on my videos. In fact, usually I'm wearing either a suit or at least a collared button-down shirt. So, you know what? Do me a favor. Let me know in the comments below. Let me know, does this increase my perceptions of warmth and likability? You can let me know by dropping a comment down below. Either it does or it doesn't. I don't really mind. But I'm curious. We'll do our own little mini research study here. Perhaps I come across as less polished in a t-shirt, or less competent. Let me know. Like I said, leave a comment. Maybe this is something that'll do new going forward. Who knows? You decide. Anyways, individuals who are highly competent tend to care more about being accurate, correct, and precise than they do about being liked. And they should probably spend extra time crafting their likability. You know, they might be found saying, hey, I don't really care if you like me. These are the facts. These are the details. Take them or leave them. This is what the truth is, and I don't really care if you like me. All right, so that's the idea there. The second noteworthy finding identified in the podcast was that individuals who are perceived as warm and likable and highly open often fall prey to the opposite pitfall, which is that they have decreased perceptions of competence. And it's kind of like people might think, well, yeah, gee, you're nice, but you're not overly competent, right? I like you, but I don't have a whole lot of respect or professional respect for you. All right, so hey, listen, on that note, perhaps a t-shirt, I come across less polished, maybe less competent, maybe more warm and maybe more likable, whatever that ends up being and playing out as. Again, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your feedback on that. Whether you care one way or another, do I come across as less competent, more warm, less warm? Be curious to see what the general consensus is. So, okay, let's get back to it. So here's the dilemma with those two noteworthy observations. Here's the dilemma that leaders face. It's the balance of warmth versus competence. And there's a weird and an awkward scenario for leaders. Because a leader might be thinking, well, if I want to maximize buy-in and influence, after all I've said before in other videos, leadership is influence, okay? Leadership is the ability to take a group or an individual from some point A to some point B while identifying and helping to overcome the roadblocks along the way. That's an action process, right? Leadership requires action. Leadership is not just being the head or the title, but it requires action. If you are going to be effective in this role, is it more important that you're competent, seen as competent, or is it more important that you're seen as warm and likable? Right? Which one, if you have to choose? Which one is more important? Let me know down in the comments below. If you're a leader, people leader, if you're managing some form or function in your organization, if you had to choose between one or the other, would you rather be perceived as warm, or would you likable, agreeable, or would you rather be perceived as competent, even if nobody likes you? Let me know. I'm curious what that would play out as. Here is the perhaps not surprising truth. If we have to, sort of choose between two false polarities, I mean, in reality, neither is better. They both have strengths and weaknesses, and ideally, as leaders, we would be perceived both with a healthy and beneficial balance of warmth and competence. So both. Both would be ideal. So the question maybe that we should ask is great with these research findings, where's the practical application? How do we actually leverage this stuff? So perhaps, as I did, perhaps you grew up with this idea or being told and sold on this idea of, it's what's on the inside that counts, right? We don't judge a book by its cover. It's what's on the inside that counts. Listen, this sounds nice. This sounds ideal, but it's nothing more than an ideal because it's simply not the reality for much of our lived experience. It does matter what's on the outside, and it does matter how people perceive you. And I can already hear you screaming through the screen, Greg, I want people to judge me based on my abilities and merits. Or to put that differently, I want to be judged based on the content of my character, right? We've heard that before. That's fantastic. And I hope that's the case for everybody. But I also know it's just not the reality for most. Right? I want to be judged on my merit. I want to be judged on my abilities. I want people to get to know me and see that I'm competent and that I'm warm. But Greg, here's the truth, though. According to the research, a first impression is formed within 100 milliseconds of meeting somebody. That means before you have the chance to open your mouth and prove your self-competence, before you have the opportunity to extend your hand in a greeting, before you have the opportunity to prove yourself and to prove your merit, there's a first impression formed about you, about me, within 100 milliseconds. We don't have that chance. Now, in the podcast, the researcher also demonstrated and pointed out that after the first impression has been made, we continue to engage in non-verbal communication and body language cues, which can often then as well be misunderstood and misrepresent our intentions or the feature of the element of warmth. As an example, crossed arms might illustrate that I'm not approachable, that I'm cold, that I really don't want to be warm in regards to getting to know or even to hear what you have to say. That's what crossed arms might demonstrate or illustrate or communicate. Or it might just demonstrate that I need to turn up the thermostat and it's a little chilly in here. In the podcast, Von Edwards mentions, though, and makes a great point, that it doesn't actually matter why your arms are crossed. And that's one example of body language. It doesn't matter why your arms are crossed. The only thing that matters is the perception and the what you communicate to the other. And so maybe it's chilly in here and I need to turn up the temperature. I need to turn up the thermostat. But if the message that I'm communicating to the other individual who's making an assessment of me within 100 milliseconds, if the message that I'm communicating is that I'm cold, that I'm not warm, that I'm standoffish, then it's the perception that is more important than the reality, right? So, there we go. I don't know about you, but I would love to have all of the chips stacked in my favor for first impressions and beyond. Wouldn't you like to have the chips stacked to your advantage? Now, if this piques your interest in any sort of way, shape, or form, I recommend that you check out the podcast. And as well, check out the research article that I've mentioned. Because here's the reality, here's the deal. We can't ever escape the bias and the assumption of others. We're never going to escape that. First impressions are formed within 100 milliseconds. We're never going to escape that bias and assumption. So we may as well understand it, and we may as well use it and leverage it to our advantage. Make sense? Check out the podcast, check out the research article to find out how you can do that. So agree with this, disagree with it, or anywhere in between. I hope for a Friday afternoon, at least, this has been food for thought. And I hope it helps. So follow me for more.